And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, boys, girls, friends, Romans, and countrymen. Lend me both of your ears. Whether you're down the street, around the corner, across America, or somewhere around this great big world, thank you for taking the time to tune in. It's going to be a delightful, a thrilling, refreshing, refreshing show. My, with all the things that's going on in this country and around the world, we need some refreshing things. A breath of fresh air. And speaking about a breath of fresh air, there's none other than Mr. Ed Temple.
I was going to say, you're going to say me? You set me up like that? My goodness. I thought you were actually going to say someone who's actually a breath of fresh air, like Dr. Teresa Sanders. Oh, you really shocked me there.
Thanks.
I caught you totally off guard, Ed.
You certainly did.
And most of all, Dr. Teresa Sanders from Dallas, Texas. She is a delight. I'm telling you, she is a delight. Here's what we want you to do. We want you to come in, leave your comments, ask questions. Let me put the phone line up here for you. If Espenlaub can find it, you know him. He's always blowing something up. There is the call-in number. And here's what we want you to do. When you call in, we can all hear you. Ask your question, make your comment, and then please hang up so we can keep the line open. And our guest, and we'll try to answer the question to the best of our ability. So call in 302-497-3414. The other thing I want to say before we go any further, if you hear me slur my words, just let me slur my words. I'm having a slight medical burp right now, but I slur my words when I don't have a medical burp. So just bear with me, and our guest and Ed will carry the torch, I'm sure. Teresa, I'm so glad to have you.
Thank you, George. Thank you, Ed. I'm excited to be here. This is very exciting.
Hey, we've had some conversations on the phone, and yesterday we did a test run, and we had another conversation. That one day we had church.
We did.
Yeah, we did.
That's what the truth does. Just, hey, it takes you where it takes you. It is what it is.
It is. Ed, take her away, buddy.
All right, let's hit this. So let's talk about you. So Dr. Teresa Sanders, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then I'll hit into some questions that'll gradually build up to getting you in trouble. I mean, that'll gradually build up to something good.
I've been in trouble. I'm not afraid.
Okay.
Okay, so I am Texas transplant from California. So I've been in Texas since 2005. I spent 20 years working in public mental health and in Sacramento, California, and I loved it. And then we moved here to Texas. And after a year working for CPS, I got into education. And I loved CPS too, but my son was little at the time, so he needed my time. And CPS is kind of dicey that way, but I loved it. And I also love education. And so this is my 14th year as an educator. I also write. I'm an author, and I write for four local paper outlets. And I've published a total of 4 works, and I'll be publishing another in the fall.
Okay, and then what of the books that you publish? Is there a common theme, or is there something that stands out with those, and is it something that that you have some kind of? Of those books, is there something that you feel really passionate about that you would want to mention?
Okay, so the 4 opportunities where I've published before are doctoral anthologies, and they all relate to education in some way. But what I'm writing, something that I didn't add in those numbers that I'm writing is a series of children's books that deal with the social emotional issues that we behavior teachers see in the classroom. There are no books really that address what we're seeing, the true issues that we're seeing. And there needs to be a way for them to be conveyed to children in a way that's not frightening, but they can relate to, and it teaches them skills on how to deal with their peers who might have those issues, and why kids might behave the way they do. And I've in all my looking, I've never seen a book that deals with that parent who's out all night and then sleeps all day, and then the children have to take care of themselves, or children dealing with anxiety that comes out in either somatic complaints, they're sick or they're angry or they're breaking things in the classroom. Those are all symptoms of things that need to be addressed. And I'm very excited to be working on a series of children's books. And so the one I'm starting with is called Perfectly Charlotte. And it's about a young lady, a little girl who has anxiety after a situation in her family occurred, and her behavior is beginning to change, and nobody knows why. And so it's going to it'll be a cute book, but it's going to be a book that causes children to think like, oh, maybe she's sad because this, maybe she's sad because that, and causes people to think, and then it gives some suggestions on how to manage it, all in the frame of a children's book.
Okay, so I got a question for you then. Since now we've kind of got a little taste of what you're about, and obviously you have a heart for teaching.
I do.
So can you tell us, your definition of what is education really about?
Education should be about helping our students and helping their families to become productive citizens, to be competent socially, emotionally, and academically, and in their own lives, even spiritually, to be productive, to be effective, to step into the roles of the next generations. That's what education should be. They should be prepared with the proper level of mathematics, reading and writing literacy, science, the arts, history. They should be being prepared to be independent, functionally independent adults. That's what school should be. And it should be fair and equitable for everybody, and inclusive of people with disabilities as well. And that's what it should be. So we should be teaching kids how to think and how to reason and how to vet information and how to identify agendas and how to identify bias, and then to be able to use what you know and what you've learned to make a decision on which way they want to go with the information. That's what education should be.
Okay. And so if education is supposed to be in theory like that, your experiences might differ from that though. What happened with you and your experience that taught you that maybe this isn't really what's going on?
I started teaching in 2006. By 2007, it really hit me. This is not about education. I went in thinking that, yes, this is going to be great, teaching kids. I've always worked in special education. I've always worked with kids with the severe behavioral problems. I love it. That's the population that I love the most. And that's where my gifting is. And it became clear that we're not here to teach these kids how to become productive young people. I worked in an environment where if we got through the day and nobody killed anyone and nobody was hanging from the ceiling, nobody was bleeding, then that was a successful day. I went in thinking, okay, when this child is 18, will this child be able to get a job? Will he be able to keep a job? Will he have the social skills to know how to deal with his bosses or colleagues or customer service? That's the way I looked at it. That's not the way they looked at it. And so there was always some dissonance there because my agenda was different than their agenda. So I did try to work within the school agenda. And after a while, I had to acknowledge that, what I was seeing being allowed to happen and go unaddressed or undisciplined, not consequenced. At some point, I had to make a decision that worked for me, and that was to leave.
Dr. Teresa, we talked the other day. Everything in our society is broke.
Yeah.
I don't care where you look, it's broke. And my wife, we've been married for 52 years now. So, when I go on one of these rants, it's her and me, or her and I, and she hears it. But I've been saying for years, Mom, everything is broke. The school system, it just didn't break overnight, did it? It's been coming a long, long time. Can you explain that?
I know that's what I've seen. I've seen it get progressively worse over the years. I have come from um, where for me, the little things like verbal disrespect, speaking inappropriately to adults, that's something I didn't tolerate in my classroom. Now, if that's all that you get, you're doing good. I remember that there was an expectation that I had a parent tell me, well, the last school he was at, he threw a chair through the window. I told her, I promise you that will not happen in this class. It won't. And it didn't, because I wouldn't tolerate that. Well, now those are things where there is tolerance for that. And with the new or I don't know how new the concept was, but the concept of room clears, where a student could be trashing the classroom, and what you do is you clear all the other students out of the classroom.
This sounds like the riots right now.
Yeah, clear all the other students out of the classroom and allow that because if the student is not hurting himself or herself or anyone else, then property is property. Now, also, on the other hand, behind the scenes, they will tell you, don't let that child destroy, an expensive computer or camera system or something like that. However, if you move in to physically stop that person, they're not going to stand behind you that they told you that, privately. They're not going to stand behind you. So the reality is that kids are allowed to destroy the room while so you have to think, when the other kids are out, they're not learning. Their room is being destroyed. And what does that do to them emotionally to know their classroom is being destroyed by their peer with essentially no consequence, especially if that child is diagnosed with any type of disability, receives special education services? There'll be no consequence for that. Well, that to me sends a wrong message. That says you can go out and you can destroy this and you can destroy that,
right,
and you won't ever get in trouble for that. So then you grow up as a young adult and as an old adult, and you think that you can pretty much do what you want and there's no consequence for that. And we both know that that's not right.
And what has happened recently? These events that are going on, not necessarily that you kind of alluded to in the pre-talk here. What events are going on that kind of teaches us about what people really think of education, or at least what the government schools think of education?
Okay, so what as far as what the government thinks about education, I look at outcomes. And I don't judge what you tell me. I don't judge how pretty the school is. I don't care how wealthy the area is. That doesn't mean anything to me. Show me the outcomes. Show me the outcomes. When you have 4 million fourth graders, and we're talking about across all socioeconomic and racial demographics in America, 4 million fourth graders, and 3 million of them cannot read proficiently, we are failing. There is no excuse for that. There is zero excuse for that. All the education policymakers know this. The data collectors know this. The heads of education know this. But yet this is allowed to persist. Why is that? We just saw over the last couple months, the federal government can find trillions of dollars for what it needs or what it feels that it needs. I guess, I mean, the printer machines are just going 24 hours, I guess. I don't know. But in the fall, I am sure the statement of the day will be, we have to make cuts, we have to make cuts, we have to make cuts, we have to make cuts. Okay, we just found trillions of dollars for this. Why are we making a cut? I haven't heard yet how we're going to pay for all of what the stimulus and all of that. I haven't heard how we're going to pay for all that yet. And so why are we cutting over here? So if you have a situation where 3 out of 4 African-American graduates cannot read well enough to do well in college, where 3 out of 4 fourth graders, regardless of the race, socioeconomic, anything, cannot read proficiently, we are failing. And this is not new failure. 50, almost 60 years of school reform has not changed much across the line the academic performances of American students. 6 decades. So if in 6 decades we still haven't slain the dragon, that tells me we're not trying to slay the dragon.
So you're saying that there's a racism of low expectations, possibly?
Not a racism, just an because the expectation of low achievement and low performance is across the board. It's not like just a race. It's across the board.
That every time you look at when you have 100 people that are all ranked number 1 in the class. I mean, what happened here? That you really think 100 people got straight A's? I don't care where you're at. There's definitely someone lower in the bar.
And the bar is probably at thigh level right now. And so now when you say that, oh, my kid goes to XYZ public school and he's in the gifted and talented program, that means nothing. It means zero. Nothing. To say that my child in Texas, it's the exemplary schools, people, that means nothing. Nothing. If you're hearing about how great your school's test scores are, I assure you they have a special kitchen where they are cooking the books. I assure you of that.
Whoa.
So it's hard to take. And so what I've challenged people to do, especially when I write my articles, is go find your son, your daughter, when next time they say to you, Mom, especially if they're around 10 years old, 8 years old, can I get the next greatest video game that's coming out? You tell your child to sit down and write you a half page, not even a full page, a half page essay persuading you to buy that for them. And you tell me what you get. Tell me if your kid nailed it, go buy him that game or her game, that game.
So what do you think about school choice?
Choice is always good. I like choice. I don't think anybody should have to stay in a system that fails. If there's someone else who can teach your children, why do I need to pay my money into a system that is clearly failing? If a restaurant serves bad food, I'm not going there anymore. I will go eat someplace else.
Can you talk a little bit, go back for a second? Because you mentioned some things about the way they're handling school kids. So when you tried to do the right thing, why did you get flack?
Because my agenda is not their agenda. The agenda is to based on outcomes. I'm only judging outcomes. They don't want kids who can read. They don't want kids who can think. They don't want kids to vet information because they're not teaching that. If they wanted that, they would teach that.
Okay, who's they?
The system, the education system. If the public education system wanted students who could read, they'd have students who could read. If they wanted students who could write, they'd have students who could write. If they wanted students who could think, they would teach students to think critically. But that's not what they're doing. So again, I'm only judging outcomes. I'm judging the outcomes. And so, like you said, Water's World there, where you go to the street and you ask somebody a random question that is taught in 4th grade in school, and 3 out of 4 people can't answer it. Yet they passed the standardized test. So what are we saying when there are kids who don't know what Martin Luther King looks like? We're not that far away that you shouldn't know who Martin Luther King looks like. Right. And I mean black kids and white kids. There's no race issue here.
No question,
It's just why is it that we're not that far away from that? There are kids right now who have no knowledge of what 9/11 is. Come on. What was that, 20 years ago? That wasn't that long ago. They don't know the significance of 9/11. Why? Why are we not teaching kids? Why? Because we're if 9/11 is on that test, they'll learn about it. But if 9/11 is not on the test, they're not going to learn about it.
All right, you had talked about in the pre-show, you were talking about kids you can clearly see, and you mentioned Water's World out of the book behind me here, which so what do you think this the idea that they're not being taught to think? Can you give some examples of that?
Well, kids who don't know how to think will end up being adults who don't know how to think. And when you don't know how to think, you will take anything that people tell you and you will go with that. So therefore, your mind, your thought, your feelings, your emotions can all be controlled by someone else, because all they have to do is feed you something. You're not going to look to see if it's correct. You're not going to look to see if it's factual. You're not going to check to see, okay, so what is the agenda of the person telling me this? And when you do that, so for example, with all the civil unrest that's going on right now, the question is, well, what is burning down a building going to do to help with this, and this? Okay, people, stop and think. You have your protesters, you have your looters, and then you have your vandals. But when you lump them all together, that changes the perception of what's going on. You can't lump them all together. Protesters go home at the end of the evening. Those who stay and stand on top of police cars and spray paint on walls are vandals, and they are looters. They can tell you that they're protesters, but let's judge the outcome. The outcome is you're burning police cars and you're spray painting on buildings. You're not a protester. You're a vandal or you're a looter, and that's what you are. Well, when we don't stop to think, that does make sense. Or then we lump everything together and we don't make differences at where critical differences need to be made. So that means any agenda that is pushed forward, even if it's not healthy for us, we may accept that because we didn't research it. We didn't look to see who's trying to push what. We didn't check what's the avenue here? What's going on here? What are they trying to determine? My suggestion for everybody is, before you align yourself with any group, any political group, any social group, any family group, any kind of a book club, find out what their agenda is. Find out if there's an agenda within the agenda.
Yep.
And then make an informed decision on whether you want to be a part of that or not.
Okay, and you had also talked about a little bit about this. This idea that you have to choose sides. For example, I'll give you an example. The last president, I had a lot of problem with some things, and then on some other things, I'll give you an example. I'll give you a positive. I said, listen, I didn't like how we handled General Motors, but I do like the fact that it stayed in business. I love the American companies. And I challenged people that were fans or against And I always challenge people. I say, listen, let's just see if you're lock and key a team player or not. And I say, okay, tell you what, tell me one good thing about this person and tell me one bad thing. To a T, never would they say anything about the last president that was negative. Never. And I'm like, see, there's something wrong with that. And see, I know these people long enough to know that they disagree with some things. But when you're afraid to speak out, I don't care who the leader is. One thing I think is refreshing about this president is the fact that people are not afraid to speak out against him, and good for that. You know what I mean? I have all kinds of problem with this debt. You mentioned debt. Goodness gracious, put the veto. Say no. It's okay. Just say no. It's easy to do. You just say no. You know, and they won't have enough votes to override a veto. So just veto. If you don't veto it, they're going to get whatever they want every time. And so that's a problem for me with the current president. But why can't we speak out against, you know, there's this idea that we have to, it's one or the other. There's this no middle ground at all anymore. What's going on?
Well, that's where the lack of critical thought and having a mind of your own comes in. That's where that comes in. That I myself am not a Trump supporter, not even remotely. If I had to say something good about him, it would be like, well, let me take a moment. You know what's good about him? He stands on what he believes. He doesn't give a rat's rump what anybody thinks. Whether we say it's right or wrong or the day is long, he's like, whatever. This is what I'm saying. Deal with it. Right. There's so much that I can say that I don't like about him. I'm not even going to go there. But the reality is that I can think and I can say now, I'll bet if I did a lot of research on him, I can find some things that this man has done that could be considered positive. But if I don't do any research, all I'm going to go on is what I'm hearing, what I'm hearing. If I don't know how to think, I'm only going on what I'm hearing, which means I'm going to say what the masses are saying because I don't know how to think. I don't know how to reason.
Herd mentality.
I don't know how to think for my own. And that's why particularly I don't join group movements. I don't do that. I can be my own movement. I don't need to be a part of this group or that. I don't need to be a part. That doesn't mean I don't think that they're okay or I don't support them or this. I truly can say there's not one group that I can say I support fully. Right. So therefore, let me be my own group.
Right.
And make my own decisions. And then the only ones I have to answer for are mine. I don't have to try to speak for this group or that group or the president or anyone else. I'll just be my own group and I will make the change that I can make. Because there's not one group out there that I can say I could totally get behind 100%. I agree with everything they're doing.
I like that, Teresa. My uncle used to say, an old country fella, he said, I have to carry my own hide to market.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
He would usually tell you that when you wanted to gossip or get mixed up with this or mixed up with that, he would always look at you and he'd say, I have to carry my own hide to market. And you knew exactly what he was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Let me pop this up here real quick. Can you see that, Teresa?
Not as good as I'd like to. Let me see what I can do to.
Let me put it over here. See if we can put our.
That's a little clearer. Let's see. Increase the poverty level as high as possible. Poor people are easier to control and will fight back if you are, and will not fight back if you're providing everything for them to live. Debt. Increase the debt to unsustainable levels. Gun control. Remove the ability to defend. Welfare. Take control of every aspect of their lives. Education. Take control of what people read and listen to. Woo!
That was written.
Please send that to me when this is over. That's awesome.
That was written by Saul Alinsky, who was an activist in the city of Chicago. Uh, that is a page straight from Lenin's playbook,
Playbook. Yeah.
and that is exactly when you said this has been happening for decades and decades. This is exactly what has been happening,
Mm-hmm.
and it just goes on and on and on and on. Uh, I thought I'd throw that up, and I will. I'll send that to you. Uh,
That's very timely, and it's very interesting because that goes back to teaching, and that goes back to thinking.
mhm, mhm.
Zelensky. You can go out to Waters World and ask anybody about Zelensky. No one's going to be able to say anything about that. I'm just saying. And when you don't teach people, when you don't teach people what like that, when you don't teach people what has happened in the past, or the reasons for making people dependent, then you're willing to go with it, especially if you're benefiting, especially if you're benefiting from the benefits that are coming out. So I think that just based on that little bit that I saw, I think, wow, I totally want to read that, because that's exactly what's happening. I can already tell you that the when you have someone who is dependent upon you for everything, you control that person.
Yes, yes.
So you provide their food, clothing, shelter, medicine, childcare, everything. What are they going to say? I don't agree with you. No, they're going to be quiet, is what they're going to do.
Mm.
That's what they're going to do, because they need you. That's why, what did I say what my takes were? Can we please make sure that whatever we're teaching, it helps kids to be able to grow up into adults who can take responsibility for themselves, who can provide for themselves and stay out of the system. Because when you can provide for yourself, then your voice is a little louder.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about this screen that hopefully George will pull in here? Right here, George. Can you
That's
talk
my
a little bit
blog.
about, yeah, can you talk a little bit about the Little Red Schoolhouse?
Okay, so my blog is called Beyond the Little Red Schoolhouse, because we are beyond the Little Red Schoolhouse. In the Little Red Schoolhouse, kids learned. They learned with no air conditioning. They learned with no free lunch. They learned with no buses. They learned with, the heat that they got came from a wood stove. They learned.
Yeah.
There was a Bible in the classroom. They learned.
Mm. There should be some value in that at one
There,
point.
and there was one teacher, and there could be multiple grade levels in that one room classroom, yet the kids learned.
Mm.
There was no technology, there were no computers, there were no iPads, there was no Wi-Fi, but they learned, and they learned to be productive citizens. We are so past that, it's ridiculous. So beyond the Little Red Schoolhouse, it's just what I use to demonstrate, folks, this is how far past right that we are. And so my blog, I talk about the unpopular but real aspects of education, of public education. Everything that I write is true. It is not something that someone else has told me. It is something that I know from experience or I have researched. And it's the truth. And people don't want the truth. People need the truth so they can make an informed decision about their children's education. That's what it is. And so it's funny that Safari Small Schools, the micro school that I started, is what? A one room schoolhouse.
Mm.
And
It's a one room schoolhouse. It is it I mean, why do we need to go back to why do we need to reinvent the wheel? Let's go back to what works. And because I serve children who often have special needs, or they may be anxious, or for whatever reason they don't do well in a classroom of 20 kids, 5 students can get the attention that they need.
hmm
And I can teach the way they learn, because there's nobody telling me I can't.
Mm. That is valuable. So when these guys are done there, do they spend the 4 years of their school high? Is it? What grade is this? I should have said.
Okay, so Safari Small Schools, the first here in Canton is the first campus. It's pre-K through third. My vision is to be able to make teacherpreneurs out of any educator who wants to start their own, because there's some educators who are middle school strong. They love it. That's their thing. Well, then open one for middle school. It may have more than 5 kids, but it should never have more than 10, because it's the smallness that makes it work.
And then, do these guys? Is it considered homeschooling? And the state recognizes it and all that.
It's a private school, but I fall under the rules of homeschooling. So technically, I only have to teach the reading, the writing, the math, and the citizenship. But I follow the TEKS just like public schools do, and I exceed what the public schools are doing because I can. Because now it's an environment that is conducive to learning.
And there's no standardized test that you have to
take.
I love Texas.
No standardized tests, none. Because standardized tests, in my opinion, don't test what we need to know. Some kids need to be assessed every 2 weeks instead of the beginning of the year, middle of the year, end of the year. I don't want to wait until the middle of the year to find out a kid is not thriving. What I need to know, some kids may need to be tested every week, every 2 weeks, so we can see the gaps or see where the problems are. Some kids every 6 weeks. It just depends.
What is it about Texas that seems to be every other person on our show is from Texas, and they tend to have a more readily open mind than most states? Is there something going on there? Is there a mentality of Texas, or what is it?
You know what? I'm a Texas transplant. I'm long-term California strong. I just am. What I do know, and I wasn't an educator in California, but I do know that Texas values homeschooling. And because I can do this, I consider myself a private school, not a homeschool. And so what I will do is I'm not accredited, because I cannot get into any government. Once I start getting into government acknowledgement, then I have to do things a certain way, and I refuse. But what I do is that because I work closely with students, parental engagement is required. It's not like it'd be great to have you involved. No, it's required because we both need to know this student can do what I said that he or she can do. Then you save work samples, you keep running records, you keep all the same documentation that you do at school. So when they do go and leave me and have to go back to the public school, you have a stack of documentation that shows. You have assessments, the same assessments they're using at school. You have assessments, you have documentation, you have work samples, and then the kid can perform to show this student is capable of entering 3rd grade.
George, can you show Tanya Werner Phillips? She had a statement.
Oh, okay.
Kind of fits into what Dr. Sanders is mentioning. There you go. I feel my daughter learns better in small classes because she gets real anxious when there's too big of a class, too much commotion, I feel. Amen to that.
Yep. Absolutely, Tanya. Absolutely. And that's why the small group. A lot of kids get overwhelmed in larger classes. Think of us when they put us in trainings as we're adults and there's 500 people in the room. We're distracted. We're overwhelmed. We start to feel squeezed out. You can't ask a question. There's 500 people in the room. We don't like it. I know I don't like it. I would rather be in a training with 15 people rather than 100 people.
Right.
And if I feel as though I don't understand something, I want to know that if I raise my hand, then the chances are likely somebody's going to see me. If there's 100 people in the room, chances are I'm not going to be seen. But she's right. I mean, many kids thrive, especially kids with behavior issues, thrive in the smaller environments.
So, Dr. Teresa, we have, I don't know, with just pick any avenue that's broke, but particularly with our school system, we know the problems, And you have said several times today, the school districts knows the problem, the state knows the problem, the feds know the problem,
Mhm.
the teachers know the problem, everybody knows the
Everybody
problem.
knows it. Yeah.
But when somebody comes up with a solution, they don't even want to talk about it. They just want to slam you shut, throw you out the door, shut it. We don't want to have that conversation.
That's right.
Why?
Because school is not about educating children.
Mhm.
That's it. School is not about preparing children to be productive adults. School is about preparing children for the great takeover. Just, you
Now,
know,
that leads me to this point. Knowing that, and everyone that has ears, let them hear.
hmm
Whether we want to see it or not, you know it.
hmm
You can deny all you want, but you know it. When you
That's
lay
right.
on the pillow at night, you know it.
That's right.
In this particular time, in the last days of the last days in which we're living, and with the chaos and the confusion, I don't know what it is in Texas, I don't know what it is in Ohio, but these people here in Delaware, they're talking about keeping school closed until perhaps the very first part of 2021.
Hmm.
Now, with all the confusion and the chaos and the non education that these kids are receiving because all this other stuff, that puts the parents right in the center of this thing. And they're going to have to make a decision.
That's right.
What say you to parents that are going to have to either pony up or just hang your head and walk off? What do you say to people?
It depends on what the parents' motivations are and what the parents' priorities are. There are some parents who are so itching to get back to work, to be free of their kids all day. They're not used to so many days, so many days. Oh my goodness, when is school going to start? There are them, and there are also parents who want to go a different direction, but they don't feel confident in their ability to homeschool. Um, so there needs to be, it would be great to be able to support them with some really true supports to be able to help them because they can do it. If a lot of parents don't know what homeschool should look like, homeschool should not look like anything. It looks like what it looks like for your family. And so it doesn't have to look like a typical school day. And people need to learn that. The reality is that people have a decision to make. You hear what's being said here. What we're saying is the truth. Ed's book tells the same exact truth, tells the truth. Escape from Uncle Sam's Plantation tells the same truth. Now that you know the truth, what are you willing to do for your child's education? Well, I can't. I have to go to work. Okay. There's some decisions you need to make.
Okay, I gotta do two things now because you brought up the book. So I gotta go back. I'm gonna get back to the book. I'm gonna go, and George, don't forget about the advertising for the next show. I just thought about that. Let me go back to you. You left something hanging there, and I was like, George. Uh, you said that it's set up for the takeover. The schools, or it's set up for the takeover. What do you mean by that?
The Great Takeover. At some point, we will be subservient to another. I don't know if it's going to be another country, another leader, another. We're moving towards the end times.
Oh, amen to that. And
We're moving toward the end times, and so there's going to come a time that a leader is going to show up.
Elon Omar just mentioned the United Nations taking over the country.
I'm just saying.
Yep.
And so if we don't know how to think, we're going to be walking lockstep into disaster. We are being prepared for that.
Yep.
Anytime that anybody does not want you to read, write, learn, think independently, that's so they can control you. I am thankful that my mother raised us in a way that we know how to think. We've never been on the system. My mother, my grandmother, everybody, we always worked 2, 3 jobs because now I have my own. And as long as I pay the taxes on it, I'm good.
Cassandra's got a statement here, George.
Ah,
Yeah, and that's the bottom line.
That's it. That's it. That's right there. Cassandra has it dialed in. That's what we all should be doing. When my nieces and nephews were little and they would come over, I was teaching them how to tie shoes. This was before I had my own son, and spell their name. All of my nieces and nephews, you can tell you who taught you how to spell your name. I did. That's what we did.
Okay, so let's hit the book. You mentioned the book, and then I want to ask you a follow-up question about the word race or racism, because that's kind of an as you mentioned it, and I like what you said about it. Let me go back to you though. You mentioned that where did the book hit home? That you've read at least some of the book that's behind me here, that's in front of you. Is there anything that you can relate to?
Yes, I can actually relate to all of it. The waters, in chapter 8 was so telling because we test. We're spending all our money on tests. We're putting all our focus on tests, and our kids know nothing. Just saying, they know nothing. The allowance of violence and not checking violence. A lot of people, especially here in Texas, don't know that there are rules in place in schools that certain groups and subgroups of students cannot be suspended. A lot of people don't know that.
Right.
And so these kids are essentially hijacking the classroom.
Yep.
And hijacking instruction, and they're suffering no consequence for it. In 2018, I was put off of work for a year. A student injured. I had a torn rotator cuff. The bicep was removed from the bone. I had to have surgery, therapy. It's all good now, which is great. But he suffered no consequence for that. Zero.
Lee McNulty, we've had him on here. He's talked about that. He taught at JFK in New Jersey. And so he can relate to that. He did a whole diary of his experience, and it's really crazy.
It's crazy.
So the word race, we talked about that. The word is, it's thrown around. Recently Drew Brees, but it's not just Drew Brees. It's, it's almost impossible to be a teacher nowadays and not be called a racist or an Uncle Tom or Oreo or some other stupid name that's way. So in other words, if you are teaching them to think, to see both sides of an issue, and sometimes I'll even give the opposite point of view, even if I don't agree with it. But the point is, you need to see all the perspectives out there, even if I irritate you to get you to get out of your comfort zone. But the point is, they need to be able to think. And so, what do you think the word is overblown? I mean, in other words, not overblown, sorry, but
it's overplayed.
Overplayed.
Yeah. It's overplayed. Now, let me start out with racism is real. We know it's real. It is a thing. Okay. However, the word racism, the term has been weaponized.
George, can you put a banner? Can you put the banner on there? I'm sorry. Can you put the word racism on a banner real quick, George?
Yeah.
Okay, just so we know what she's talking about.
The term has been weaponized to where there's a lot. Nobody wants to be called a racist, a bigot. Nobody wants to be called that. And so one way to get people to back off from it could be a legitimate situation is to say, you know what, you're a racist. You're doing this because I am Black or white or Hispanic or yellow or whatever. You're saying this because I am that. When actually you know that that's not the situation, but it's going to get you what you want. And so that's the card that you play. Unfortunately, and I get it because I have heard children, third graders, fourth graders, you're racist. I tell them, you gotta, not, they didn't call me that, but they called other teachers that. And I'm like, you gotta be able to spell racist before you can even say that. You can't just say that to teachers, but they learned that somewhere. Exactly. They learned that somewhere. And so wherever they got it, they know if I call you a racist, it is going to, whoa, I'm not even going to deal with this situation and I'm going to walk away, especially if you're other than Black. Nobody wants to be called a racist. And people have learned if I play that card, I'm pretty much going to get what I want. The unfortunate part is there's so much racism that could be truly identified that the word has kind of been watered down and played so often that it takes away from the times that that word needs to be played.
Amen. George, you better play that advertisement for tomorrow's show because you're running out of time.
Yeah, let me put this up here. We'll take a little break. Tonight at 7, we are coming back on the air with a lady that was arrested. And I'm just going to play a very quick clip of her arrest in Florida. Watch this. This is what the show will be about tonight.
Mom, listen. Why are you guys doing that? No. You guys are going to hell. You both are going to hell. This is her country. This is her country.
That will be tonight. Cindy Valco will be with us, and she will share with us what happened. It took all those policemen, those big burly men. They zip-tied her, they cuffed her and stuffed her, and took her away.
Now, George, you're not saying you're against police, are you?
No, I'm not against the police. No, I'm just against these things when these so-called we call our governor here King Carney in Delaware with all his proclamations and
over policing.
Yeah, this and that and other things. But you will see tonight, Cindy will tell you herself exactly what happened. And there was another incident before that involved some other people. So you'll see the whole account and hear the whole story tonight at 7. So make sure you tune in, and we'll post some stuff. But my oh my, it just as I always like to say, it'll just jar your slats for sure. It'll jar your slats. Wow.
Do you, Dr. Sanders? Do you notice? I can't speak for everywhere and everything. I just know that Columbus City Schools has been part of a big grading scandal just years back. Atlanta public schools had the same issue. I know Minnesota schooling, in particular Minneapolis, who's having all this stuff going on. Minneapolis schools have had a lot of issues themselves in terms of I've mentioned that in my book. They've kind of fudged the numbers and to try it, and then basically, like you were talking about in Texas, tolerating things that don't need to be tolerated, and basically making the teachers feel like they're if the kid's in trouble, they're automatically a racist.
Right.
That kind of thing. And anyways,
and that's real. That statement there, that's real. That's so real, and that's most unfortunate because that's bad.
Yeah, it's funny because I have. I know we're running out of time, but I have kids that are on my Facebook, maybe watching right now. But some of them used to come over, and we would take them out fishing, and so on and so forth. And these guys are now like professional fishermen, and I've never gotten any better. I'm still not good at fishing, but I enjoy doing it. George is terrible at it, but don't bring up that memory. But the point is,
I'm good at it.
Well, that you build relationships with kids, but it's funny how much that it's not even they don't want it to be about that. They just want it to be about how many kids can you pass. They're lowering the bar. Yeah. It used to be a 1.0 as a passing. Now 0.55 in Columbus is passing. I mean, seriously, it's getting ridiculous. You're making it easier for them to go into life thinking that everything is just a gift. You're supposed to get this. You're supposed to. It's like everybody gets a trophy.
Yeah. Bad.
And if you speak out against it, what you get, and other teachers will imply it to you, and administrators.
Oh yeah.
And it's very sad. You have to walk this tightrope if you actually want kids to think. And
and then you have to determine who you are as a human being. I have children, and I'm assuming that y'all have children. I don't want my child in a situation where he's not being taught to think. We have taught him to think his entire life, and then when school things come up, we're like, okay, so let's think about that. Let's talk about that. Well, he knows how to think for himself, but the way we're leaving kids now, the school is really truly letting these kids down. And if parents are not paying attention, then they're going to be they're going to be terrified when they realize how unprepared their students actually are. And so, teachers being made to feel as though they're racist because they bring up, hey, what about this, that is garbage, and it works. And that's why people use that strategy, because it works. They don't care anything about you. They don't care if you go home like, gosh, I don't want people to think I'm a racist. They don't care about that.
I think you said it right. It sets us up for the takeover, because
The Great Takeover, yes.
you're afraid to speak out. People wonder how Hitler got away with what he did. He made everything, if you speak out, you got the Gestapos, or in Russia, the Russians, you have your KGB, you got somebody always watching, always listening, and always trying, or even let's go to Iran, always trying to, correct your speech, clean your speech, get rid of all the statues, get rid of everything that reminds you of what happened. So get rid of everything. So then the only thing left is what they tell you.
Exactly. And all that takes is a half of a generation, and then they're in. Yep. And that we've already been taken over internally. And so now we just have to wait to see who's going to take over after this, because when they call us the greatest power in the world, I don't think that anymore. I'm like, no, we're not.
Teresa, when you said the Great Takeover, that is perhaps the first time that I have heard anyone say it using those terms. And you hit that nail right on the head. The Great Takeover.
The Great Takeover.
And it's coming. It's coming.
It is.
And that's another one of those things that people, even if you see it and you turn your head, I won't look at it, maybe it'll go away. It's not going away. It will not go away. You know it won't go away. You know the day is here. It has arrived.
It's here. Yeah.
Yeah. And we are in the last days of the last days.
Here.
Let me put this up here. Not that one. I'm sorry. This one. With Tanya's question here. So many children, they have it broke down to 3 schools. We're still over 3,000 kids. Wow.
At each school?
Probably total. There's still over 3,000 kids. But yeah, the class size is just too big. Like she said earlier, she gets anxious when there's big crowds, too much commotion.
Too much. Yeah, a lot of kids, and kids with no diagnosed disability just are really, really anxious when there's a lot of commotion. And I don't know why that is. It just is what it is, but we're not addressing it. And so then when it's not addressed and they're anxious, what's going on in them may come out in behavior, tears, feeling sick, whatever. And so then we treat the symptom, but not the problem.
Yeah.
Kids will thrive when their emotional needs are met, when their academic needs are met, when their physical needs are met. Kids will thrive when we're meeting their needs in school.
Yeah. And she said, yep, there's no disability, but it's just too much
for her. Absolutely. It's like I want to take her little and just, because it's true. It's true. Some kids just don't do well. And it's not like they're bad or there's something wrong. It's not. They just need a small, peaceful, calm environment. With the numbers in classrooms going up, I mean, what can you do with 25 kids in a classroom? What is that? Like, that's ridiculous.
You mentioned that they would say just take the kids out of the classroom and let that individual tear it up.
Tear it up. That's a room clear. Hmm.
And they don't even think of what it's doing to the kids that's outside the classroom
Nope.
watching this, listening to
Mm-mm.
this.
They don't get to debrief it. They don't get to talk about it. The kid who did it, should be made to apologize to the class. That is absolutely ridiculous. And yet, that's the standard in our schools. That's the standard. So, really, to me, if we're waiting for the government to fix schools, it's been 60 years. 60 years of reform and nothing has changed. Judge the outcomes. Again, judge the outcomes. That's the only way I make my decisions. What are the outcomes? What am I getting out of this? And failure for 60 years is what we've gotten. So you have a choice. You can continue to trust the public schools, or you can start exploring options. And that's why I really want, there are some phenomenal teachers out there who love kids, who are, Ed, in the same position as you are, and I found myself in, who I really wish that to see Safari Small Schools or something like it everywhere, where in this area there's one, in that area there's one, within 3 miles there's another one. So there's a school for everybody. And wouldn't it be great if we could take our tax dollars that we're funding a system that's not doing anything for our kids to pay for an option?
Right.
I'm just saying.
Absolutely right.
Exactly.
Yes, I got to give it to you. You are refreshing.
Thank you.
Wow. I have had a wonderful time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been lots of fun.
We need to have you come back again.
Anytime. I'd love to come back. Anytime.
All right.
Ed, give me your final thoughts. We'll put a caboose on this thing.
Oh, I just think that every time we have a great guest and we learn something, it's always a good day. So we're hopefully this will get a lot more watch parties and more of this will come out, and people will see that when they hear the same thing from, not the same thing, but the same concept of what's going on in the schools from more than one person, from more than one state. It's all, it's pretty clear. We need to start paying attention, and people need to start waking up. Wake
up. Yes, because it's true. It's all true. And people just need to, if people did their own research, they would find out that it's true.
Yeah, it's true.
It's frightening. And they demand that their tax dollars be given back to them so they can take their kids to someone who will teach them.
Exactly.
Come out from amongst that herd mentality and stand up. God created you in his likeness and his image as an individual. He gave each and every one of us a brain, although I only have one half brain cell left. But he gave each and every one of us a brain. Use it. Use it.
Yes.
Don't allow someone else to poison it.
That's right.
Use it. Exercise your brain like you would exercise your body.
Absolutely.
And you'll find out that things look a whole lot different when you do that.
That's right.
Dr. Teresa, thank you so very, very much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Let's stay in touch.
Absolutely.
And we'll have you back as you continue the journey.
Absolutely. Ed, you and I will be in touch as well.
Yes,
and you know what? Thank you so much for the opportunity to just tell my little bit of the story. And I look forward to coming back. And
yep, we need to get you definitely back when the book is ready to be published, so we can talk about the book.
Yes.
Absolutely. So thank you all again, and thank you all. The great questions, the great statements. Awesome.
Oh, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, friends, Romans, and countrymen, whether you're down the street, around the corner, across America, or somewhere around this great big world, thank you for tuning in. And don't forget, tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, we will have Cindy Falco on, and you'll not only see, but she will tell you the story of her incident that happened in Florida. So join us at 7 p.m. tonight. We'll put more up. You can see it as it's coming down the road. Thank you for all of your time or your kind words. Thank you for everything and all your support. You have really been a blessing, Dad and I. and we really appreciate everything that everyone is doing for us. So remember, be kind one to another,
Mm.
love one another, please take care of one another,
Yes.
and don't ever forget, please, don't be afraid to tell someone, I love you.
Yeah.
It could possibly save a life. So until then, I trust that God will keep you right in the center of his hand. See you tonight, everybody.